Jennifer Shah. Jen Shah was one of the breakout stars of The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City and lived on camera as the picture of luxury, flaunting designer fashion, assistance, and the image of a self-made entrepreneur. But behind that reality TV glamour was a darker operation that would ultimately bring her down. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, from at least 2012 until her arrest in 2021, Jen Shah was involved in a nationwide telemarketing scheme that targeted thousands of victims, many of them elderly and vulnerable. Prosecutors said she and her co-conspirators sold so-called business services, including coaching and marketing leads that were essentially worthless. She maintained control over sales floors that deceived victims into paying for non-existent opportunities. Federal agents arrested her on March 30, 2021 in Utah while she was filming for The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. She was charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud and conspiracy to commit money laundering. At first she pleaded not guilty, insisting she had done nothing wrong, but by July 2022 she changed her plea to guilty, admitting in court that she knowingly offered services that had little to no value. As part of her plea deal, Jen Shah agreed to forfeit $6.5 million and pay up to $9.5 million in restitution to the victims of her scheme. On January 6, 2023, Judge Sidney H. Stein of the U.S. District Court in Manhattan sentenced her to 78 months in federal prison. That's 6.5 years, followed by 5 years of supervised release. The court emphasized that her fame and wealth would not shield her from accountability. Jen Shah began serving her sentence in February 2023 at Bryan Federal Prison Camp in Texas. In March 2023, her term was reduced by 1 year, and later, in 2024, an additional 8 months were cut. According to updated federal records, her new projected release date is October 4, 2026. Joshua James Duggar. Josh Duggar was once the smiling face of America's wholesome, conservative family life, a central figure on TLC's hit reality show 19 Kids and Counting, which followed the Duggar family's devout Christian household in Arkansas. But behind the image of purity and moral discipline was a long-buried truth that would later destroy everything. Back in 2002 and 2003, when Duggar was a teenager, police reports revealed that he had molested 5 young girls, including his sisters and a family friend, touching them inappropriately while they slept or were awake. The incidents were investigated in 2006, but the statute of limitations had expired, preventing prosecution. Years later, in May 2015, those reports surfaced publicly, and the revelation forced TLC to cancel 19 Kids and Counting permanently. Duggar publicly admitted to inexcusable actions and also resigned from his position at the Family Research Council after being linked to the Ashley Madison Affair website, which exposed his infidelity and hypocrisy. Yet the most serious downfall came years later. In May 2019, federal investigators from Homeland Security tracked disturbing digital activity to a computer at Duggar's used car lot in Springdale, Arkansas. The evidence showed that he had used special software to bypass internet monitoring, set up a secret partition, and download child sexual abuse material, including images depicting the sexual torture of young children. Agents described the material as among the worst they had ever seen. When authorities raided his dealership in November 2019, they seized his desktop computer and traced multiple downloads directly to him. Josh Duggar was arrested on April 29, 2021, and charged with receiving and possessing child sexual abuse material. A federal jury convicted him on December 9, 2021, after testimony and forensic analysis tied the downloads to his personal devices, accounts, and timestamps matching his phone usage. On May 25, 2022, U.S. District Judge Timothy L. Brooks sentenced Joshua James Duggar to 151 months in federal prison, equivalent to 12 years and 7 months, followed by 20 years of supervised release. He was also fined and ordered to register as a sex offender. Under his restrictions, Duggar cannot access the internet, have unsupervised contact with minors, or view explicit content of any kind. He is currently serving his sentence at FCI Seagoville, a low-security federal correctional institution in Texas known for housing sex offenders. Michael Todd Chrisley and Julie Chrisley. Todd Chrisley, star of the USA Network reality show Chrisley Knows Best, built a public image as a sharp-tongued, wealthy patriarch living in luxury with his wife Julie Chrisley. But behind the scenes, federal prosecutors said their fortune was fueled by fraud. In August 2019, a federal grand jury indicted Todd and Julie on 12 counts, including conspiracy to commit bank fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and tax evasion. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, the couple used false bank statements and fabricated financial reports to obtain over $30 million in fraudulent loans from community banks. Prosecutors alleged they spent the money on extravagant lifestyles, designer clothes, luxury cars, real estate, and travel, while using new fraudulent loans to pay off old ones to keep the illusion of wealth alive. The indictment also accused the Chrisleys of evading federal taxes and failing to file returns for several years. Between 2013 and 2016, they were said to have concealed income and operated through a company that diverted funds to avoid payment to the IRS. Investigators testified that Todd directed associates to falsify financial documents, even after banks began investigating inconsistencies in their records. Their trial began in May 2022 in Atlanta, Georgia. After 3 weeks of testimony and witness statements, the jury found both Todd and Julie guilty on June 7, 2022, of all counts in the superseding indictment. Julie was convicted on an additional count of obstruction of justice. On November 21, 2022, Judge Eleanor L. Ross sentenced Todd Chrisley to 12 years in federal prison and Julie Chrisley to 7 years, followed by 16 months of supervised release. The court also ordered them to pay $17.8 million in restitution. Todd was assigned to federal prison camp Pensacola in Florida, and Julie reported to FMC Lexington in Kentucky, both on January 17, 2023. In June 2024, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals upheld their convictions, but ruled that Julie's sentencing guidelines had been misapplied, sending her case back for re-sentencing. In September 2024, Julie stood before the court in tears, apologizing to her family and the court. But a federal judge again imposed a 7-year prison term, maintaining the restitution order. Then, in a stunning twist, President Donald Trump granted both Todd and Julie Chrisley full presidential pardons on May 27, 2025. The pardon wiped away their remaining prison time after they had served roughly 2 years behind bars, and they were released from federal custody. Jeffrey Paschel, the former cast member on 90 Day Fiancé, before the 90 Days, had a violent past long before reality TV made him a familiar face. According to official Tennessee court records, Jeffrey had previous felony convictions, including drug trafficking offenses in both Blount County, Tennessee, and the Eastern District of Texas. Despite his television image as a man seeking love, prosecutors later revealed a history that painted a much darker picture. On the night of June 9, 2019, in Knoxville, Tennessee, Jeffrey brutally assaulted his then-fiancée, Kristen Chapman Wilson. According to the Knox County District Attorney's Office, Jeffrey grabbed the victim by the head, slammed her face into the hardwood floor, and dragged her through the house by her hair and neck. The attack left her bruised, bleeding, and temporarily unconscious. When she tried to call for help, he took her phone and prevented her from leaving the home. Kristen eventually escaped to a neighbor's house, where police found visible injuries, including abrasions, bruises, and a possible concussion. Jeffrey was arrested and charged with aggravated kidnapping, domestic assault, and interference with emergency calls. During the trial, prosecutors argued that the assault was part of a pattern of violent behavior, while Jeffrey claimed the injuries were self-inflicted, but the jury did not believe his defense. In October 2021, a Knox County jury found him guilty on all counts. In February 2022, criminal court judge Kyle A. Hickson sentenced Jeffrey Paschel to 18 years in the Tennessee Department of Correction without the possibility of parole. The district attorney's office described the punishment as a victory for domestic violence victims, emphasizing the brutality of the assault. As of 2025, Jeffrey Paschel remains incarcerated in a Tennessee state prison, serving his term in full. Joseph Maldonado Passage. Known worldwide as Joe Exotic, he operated the Greater Wynwood Exotic Animal Park in Wynwood, Oklahoma, where he kept and bred hundreds of big cats, including tigers and lions. Over the years, he became notorious for his flamboyant persona and his appearance in the 2020 Netflix documentary Tiger King: Murder, Mayhem, and Madness, which chronicled his eccentric lifestyle and escalating feud with animal rights activist Carole Baskin, the founder of Big Cat Rescue in Tampa, Florida. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, Joe Exotic's rivalry with Baskin intensified as she publicly criticized his roadside zoo and accused him of mistreating animals and illegally breeding tiger cubs. Prosecutors later revealed that his anger turned into a violent plot, and between July and December 2017, he attempted to hire 2 different men to murder Carole Baskin. One of them happened to be an undercover FBI agent. In recorded conversations and text messages, Joe agreed to pay $5,000 to carry out the killing and even discussed methods of doing it while Baskin was at her Florida sanctuary. During the investigation, federal authorities also discovered that Joe Exotic had committed 17 wildlife-related crimes, including the illegal sale of tiger cubs and falsifying records under the Lacey Act. He was also charged under the Endangered Species Act for shooting and killing 5 tigers to make space for other animals in his cages. The evidence showed that Joe ordered his employees to destroy the carcasses and falsify paperwork to conceal the killings. He was arrested in Gulf Breeze, Florida, in September 2018 and later extradited to Oklahoma. Following a 2-week trial in January 2020, a federal jury in Oklahoma City found him guilty on 19 counts, including 2 counts of murder for hire, 8 violations of the Lacey Act, and 9 violations of the Endangered Species Act. On January 22, 2020, U.S. District Judge Scott L. Polk sentenced Joe Exotic to 22 years in federal prison. However, in July 2021, the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the 2 murder-for-hire convictions should have been grouped together for sentencing, resulting in a reduced term. In January 2022, Judge Polk resentenced Joe Exotic to 21 years in federal prison, where he has remained. Despite his conviction, he continues to maintain his innocence and has publicly claimed that he was set up by former zoo partners and federal authorities. Michael Paul Sorrentino. Mike the Situation, known for his fame on MTV's Jersey Shore, became the center of a major federal investigation that exposed a years-long pattern of tax evasion and financial deception. Behind the flashy TV persona, prosecutors said he had hidden millions from the IRS while his fame was at its peak. The trouble began in 2014 when Mike and his brother Mark Sorrentino were first indicted for failing to pay taxes on approximately $8.9 million in income earned between 2010 and 2012. Investigators alleged that the brothers underreported earnings from nightclub appearances, promotional events, and other television-related ventures. In April 2017, the U.S. Attorney's Office filed a superseding indictment that expanded the charges to include tax evasion, structuring bank deposits to avoid federal reporting, and falsifying records. According to the Department of Justice, Mike admitted that he intentionally made multiple cash deposits under $10,000 to evade detection, effectively concealing large portions of his income. On January 19, 2018, in Newark Federal Court, he pleaded guilty to 1 count of tax evasion, while Mark pleaded guilty to aiding in the preparation of a false tax return. He was sentenced on October 5, 2018 to 8 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release, 500 hours of community service, a $10,000 fine, and $123,913 in restitution. Mark was sentenced separately to 24 months behind bars for his role in the scheme. Before reporting to prison, the court granted Mike the Situation a short delay so he could marry his longtime fiancée Lauren Pesci. On January 15, 2019, he surrendered to the Federal Correctional Institution in Otisville, New York, where he served his sentence. He was released on September 12, 2019, after completing his 8-month prison term. But even after regaining his freedom, legal and financial complications lingered. In 2020, probation officials reported that he had completed only 18 hours of his required 500 hours of community service, prompting renewed scrutiny. By 2025, the IRS had filed a $2.3 million federal tax lien against him for unpaid taxes, underscoring that his financial battles were far from over. Amber Leanne Portwood. Amber Portwood rose to fame as one of the original cast members on MTV's Teen Mom, where her turbulent relationship with her then-boyfriend Gary Shirley was broadcast to millions. But behind the reality show's drama, real crimes were unfolding on camera. In 2010, Amber was shown repeatedly hitting and choking Gary during an episode filmed in Anderson, Indiana. The footage triggered an investigation by local police and the Department of Child Services, leading to her arrest on 3 counts of domestic violence, including 2 felonies. In June 2011, Amber pleaded guilty to 2 felony domestic battery charges. The court sentenced her to 2 years of probation and a suspended prison term, requiring her to complete anger management classes and stay drug-free. But by December 2011, she was arrested again after police found a controlled substance in her possession, violating the terms of her probation. At a January 2012 hearing, she pleaded guilty to the new drug charge and was given a 5-year suspended sentence on the condition that she complete a court-ordered drug rehabilitation program. However, in March 2012, Amber failed a mandatory drug test, breaking the terms of her rehab agreement. The judge initially allowed her another chance with daily testing, but weeks later, she voluntarily quit the rehabilitation program altogether, and that decision reinstated her full 5-year prison term. On June 13, 2012, Amber Portwood was remanded to the Indiana Department of Correction to serve her sentence. While incarcerated, she earned her GED and participated in substance abuse treatment programs. After showing consistent good behavior, she was released early in late 2013, serving approximately 17 months of her 5-year sentence. Her release marked a turning point, as she publicly acknowledged her long-term struggles with prescription and illicit drug use during her teen mom years, calling her imprisonment both punishment and rehabilitation. Mendeecees Harris. He was best known for his role on Love and Hip Hop New York and lived a double life, one in front of cameras and another deep within the shadows of the drug trade. Between 2005 and 2012, federal investigators revealed Mendeecees was involved in a large-scale narcotics trafficking conspiracy that funneled heroin and cocaine from New York City to Rochester, New York. The operation moved significant quantities of drugs for resale, and Mendeecees' name appeared among those directing and financing shipments. While he built a public image as a music manager and devoted family man on VH1, prosecutors said he was simultaneously orchestrating drug transactions and laundering the proceeds. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of New York, Mendeecees conspired with several individuals to distribute at least 100 grams of heroin and 500 grams of cocaine. The investigation, conducted by the DEA, the IRS, and Rochester Police, linked him to multiple deliveries and payments related to the narcotics operation. In April 2015, he pleaded guilty in federal court before U.S. District Judge Frank P. Giudice, Jr. He admitted to participating in the trafficking conspiracy and agreed to forfeit $170,755 in income he had earned from Love and Hip Hop New York, along with his 2011 Audi R8 luxury car valued at approximately $111,000. These assets were identified as proceeds or items purchased with the profits from the drug network. On December 1, 2015, Judge Giudice sentenced Mendeecees Harris to 97 months in federal prison, just over 8 years. The sentence reflected the scale of his criminal involvement and the length of time he had evaded accountability. Adam Jasinski. When Adam Jasinski won Season 9 of CBS's Big Brother in 2008, he walked away with a $500,000 prize and national fame. But less than 2 years later, the reality star's life took a dramatic and criminal turn. On October 17, 2009, Adam was arrested in North Reading, Massachusetts, after attempting to sell 2,000 oxycodone pills to a cooperating witness who was working with federal agents. Investigators said he met with the informant and showed him a bag filled with oxycodone pills before being taken into custody by the DEA. Following his arrest, federal prosecutors revealed that Adam had used part of his Big Brother winnings to fund his illegal drug operation. He was charged with possession with intent to distribute oxycodone and failure to file a tax return on his 2008 reality TV earnings. Prosecutors later noted that this was not Adam's first run-in with the law. He had previously been placed on probation in New York for another drug offense. In October 2010, he pleaded guilty to both the drug distribution and tax charges in federal court. His defense attorneys told the court that he had long struggled with bipolar disorder and substance addiction, arguing that those issues had played a major role in his downward spiral after sudden fame. On January 24, 2011, Judge Denise Casper sentenced Adam Jasinski to 4 years in federal prison, far less than the potential 20-year maximum for the drug charge. The judge cited Adam's efforts to seek treatment and address his mental health and addiction issues as part of the reason for a reduced sentence. Renee Alway. Renee Alway was once known to millions as the fierce and ambitious contestant from America's Next Top Model, Cycle 8, finishing third in the competition. But years after the cameras stopped rolling, her life took a dark and devastating turn that would end not in fame, but in prison. In June 2013, Palm Springs police responded to a report of a suspicious woman seen near a vacant home on Violetta Drive. When officers arrived, they found a door ajar and, after a tense standoff, discovered Renee Alway hiding in the garage. The incident exposed a string of crimes that painted a troubling picture of her downfall. Investigators learned that between June 21 and 26, 2013, Renee had burglarized several homes across Palm Springs, including residences on Calle Tranquilo, Tanger Court, Juanita Drive, and Toledo Avenue. Police said she stole personal property, broke into unoccupied homes, and even took a 2001 Mercedes-Benz CL600 registered in Minnesota. During her arrest, she was also found in possession of a .22 caliber semi-automatic handgun, despite being a convicted felon prohibited from owning firearms. The charges stacked quickly: multiple counts of residential burglary, vehicle theft, firearm possession, identity theft, and receiving stolen property. Additional allegations of check forgery, drug possession, and resisting arrest were later dismissed as part of a plea agreement. The former model's arrest shocked fans who remembered her fierce persona on America's Next Top Model and later on the spin-off Modelville. Once appearing in photo shoots and even landing a small role on the CBS drama Shark, Renee Alway's life had spiraled under the weight of addiction and instability. Her mugshot, showing visible bruising and exhaustion, became a haunting image of a fallen star once poised for success. On December 10, 2014, inside a Riverside County courtroom, Renee Alway pleaded guilty to 4 felony counts of burglary, 1 count of vehicle theft, 1 count of being a felon in possession of a firearm, and 1 misdemeanor count of identity theft. The court sentenced her to 12 years in California State Prison and ordered her to pay more than $58,000 in restitution to her victims. Although her sentence was lengthy, she served about 5 years before being released in April 2018. Teresa Giudice. She was one of the stars of The Real Housewives of New Jersey and became the center of a high-profile federal fraud case that exposed years of financial deception beneath her televised image of luxury. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, Teresa and her husband, Giuseppe Joe Giudice, engaged in a long-running financial scheme between 2001 and 2008. In which they intentionally overstated their incomes on loan applications and submitted false W-2 forms, fake pay stubs, and other fabricated documents to obtain mortgages and lines of credit. They also concealed assets and income during their later bankruptcy filing. The couple's financial misrepresentations, prosecutors said, allowed them to live a lavish lifestyle that was entirely built on fraud. In July 2013, a federal grand jury in New Jersey indicted them on 39 counts of conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud, bank fraud, making false statements on loan applications, and bankruptcy fraud. The following year, on March 4, 2014, both Teresa and Joe pleaded guilty to several charges, including conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud and multiple counts of bankruptcy fraud, in exchange for a plea agreement with prosecutors. Under that plea, Teresa agreed to pay $200,000 toward restitution. On October 2, 2014, U.S. District Judge Esther Salas sentenced Teresa Giudice to 15 months in federal prison, along with 2 years of supervised release, and ordered her and Joe to pay $414,588 in restitution jointly. Judge Salas emphasized that prison time was absolutely necessary, rejecting arguments that Teresa should receive only probation. Joe Giudice received 41 months in prison and a $10,000 fine. Because the couple had 4 young daughters, the judge allowed them to serve their sentences separately, Teresa first, followed by Joe, so one parent could remain at home with their children. Teresa began her sentence on January 5, 2015, at the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury, Connecticut. She served nearly 11 months before being released early on December 23, 2015, for good behavior. Joe was further charged by the state for obtaining a driver's license using his brother's identity after his own license was suspended after a January 2010 driving under the influence arrest. Following his sentence to 41 months in federal prison and 2 years of supervised release, Joe reported to FCI Fort Dix in March 2016 to begin serving his sentence. After completing his 41-month term in March 2019, he was immediately transferred to Immigration and Customs Enforcement custody due to his Italian citizenship and faced deportation proceedings. Bhagavan Antle, Bhagavan Doc Antle, the flamboyant wildlife park owner featured in Netflix's Tiger King and The Doc Antle Story, long portrayed himself as a conservationist and educator. But federal prosecutors say behind the image was a pattern of illegal wildlife trading and money laundering that spanned years. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, Antle and his co-conspirators conspired to violate the Lacey Act by trafficking endangered species, including cheetahs, lions, tigers, and a juvenile chimpanzee, between September 2018 and May 2020. They disguised the transfers as legitimate sales or donations through his Myrtle Beach safari facility and related nonprofits. To conceal the profits, Antle laundered more than $500,000 in cash he believed was derived from human smuggling operations, routing the money through his wildlife park and describing the deposits as construction or animal care payments. In November 2023, Antle pleaded guilty to 2 felony conspiracies: wildlife trafficking under the Lacey Act and money laundering conspiracy. On July 8, 2025, U.S. District Judge Joseph Dawson III sentenced him to 1 year and 1 day in federal prison, imposed a $55,000 fine, ordered 3 years of supervised release, and required him to forfeit 3 chimpanzees and more than $197,000 connected to the offenses. At sentencing, Antle admitted wrongdoing, telling the court he made a mistake and he did stupid things. Prosecutors argued he had exploited endangered animals for personal gain, while the judge noted that, even though there was no evidence of direct animal cruelty, the crimes undermined conservation laws. In related state proceedings, Antle was previously convicted in Virginia of wildlife trafficking and conspiracy charges in 2023. He initially received a suspended 2-year sentence, a $10,000 fine, and 5 years of probation. In early 2025, Virginia's appeals court overturned 2 of those counts but upheld the others, leaving felony convictions intact. Abby Lee Miller, the Pittsburgh-born dance instructor who rose to fame as the hard-edged star of Dance Moms, became the focus of a federal investigation after prosecutors discovered that she had concealed hundreds of thousands of dollars in income from her bankruptcy court. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Pennsylvania, Abby failed to disclose more than $775,000 she earned between 2012 and 2013 from dance projects, including television appearances, master classes, and merchandise sales. During her Chapter 11 bankruptcy proceedings, she was accused of hiding this income through secret accounts and false reports to mislead the court and her creditors. In addition to the hidden earnings, federal agents uncovered that in 2014, Abby had smuggled approximately $120,000 in Australian currency into the United States without declaring it, following her Dance Moms Masterclass tour in Australia. This led to an additional charge of illegally transporting monetary instruments across the border. The Department of Justice described Abby's conduct as a calculated effort to deceive the court while living a life of televised luxury. In June 2016, Abby Lee Miller pleaded guilty to bankruptcy fraud and failing to report an international currency transaction. 1 year later, in May 2017, U.S. District Judge Joy Flowers Conti sentenced her to 1 year and 1 day in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release. She was also fined $40,000 and ordered to pay a $120,000 judgment related to the currency offense. Miller began serving her sentence at the Federal Correctional Institution in Victorville, California, in July 2017, and after roughly 8 months, she was released early in March 2018 to a halfway house in Long Beach, California, due to health complications. Will Cortez Robinson. In 2016, Love and Hip Hop Atlanta star Willie Cortez Robinson, known to fans as Scrap DeLeon, was sentenced in a Georgia courtroom to 20 years, with the first 5 years to be served in prison and the remaining 15 years on probation, after being found guilty of marijuana trafficking. According to Radar Online, the sentence also included a fine of $100,000 and additional court costs, bringing the total to about $175,100. Court records from Taliaferro County, Georgia, show that on May 13, 2014, Robinson and his co-defendant, Ravin J. Fruster, were indicted for trafficking more than 10 pounds of marijuana, a violation under the Georgia Controlled Substances Act. The case fell into the felony range for quantities between 10 and 2,000 pounds, carrying mandatory prison time. Before his drug trafficking case, Robinson had already built up a record of previous arrests. As Starcasm reported, he was arrested in July 2010 in Fulton County, Georgia, and charged with carrying a pistol without a license, failure to stop at a stop sign, no insurance, possession of marijuana, and theft by receiving stolen property. The following year, in December 2011, he was booked again in the same county for carrying a concealed weapon, possession of marijuana, and theft, though one of the firearm charges was later modified. Reports from Inquisitor and Starcasm also reference a 2012 investigation involving Robinson, his brother Sass, and their mother Karen King, who were accused in a kidnapping and assault case that was eventually dropped. Following his 2016 sentencing, Radar Online confirmed that Robinson's maximum possible release date was set for January 20, 2021, as noted in Starcasm's coverage of his prison record. Will Cortez Robinson was released from prison on March 1, 2019, after serving roughly 3 years of his 5-year term. Upon release, he re-entered the public eye, returning to Love and Hip Hop Atlanta for its 8th season and speaking openly about his incarceration and rebuilding his life. Richard Hatch. He was the original winner of Survivor, Borneo in 2000, and became one of television's first reality superstars when he walked away with the show's historic $1 million prize. But years later, that same win would lead to a federal conviction. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, Richard failed to report his Survivor winnings, as well as additional income from rental properties and radio appearances, on his 2000 and 2001 tax returns. Prosecutors alleged that he had knowingly evaded taxes on more than $1.4 million in income, causing an unpaid tax bill exceeding $400,000. In 2006, federal prosecutors in Rhode Island charged him with multiple counts of tax evasion, filing false returns, and bank fraud. During his trial, Richard claimed that CBS, the network airing Survivor, had agreed to pay the taxes on his winnings, an assertion CBS denied. After weeks of testimony, a federal jury found him guilty on 10 counts related to tax evasion and filing false returns, but he was acquitted on mail fraud and bank fraud charges. On May 16, 2006, U.S. District Judge Ernest Torres sentenced Richard Hatch to 51 months in federal prison, emphasizing that his sentence was increased because he had committed perjury while testifying in his own defense. The Department of Justice confirmed that Richards's actions demonstrated a pattern of intentional deceit. He was ordered to serve 3 years of supervised release following his prison term and to pay back taxes owed to the Internal Revenue Service. Richard Hatch served his sentence at the Federal Correctional Institution in Morgantown, West Virginia, and was released in May 2009, but continued to face legal trouble. In 2011, he was ordered back to federal prison for 9 additional months, after violating the terms of his supervised release by failing to refile amended tax returns. Jorge Nava. The man, once known for his dramatic storyline on 90 Day Fiancé, found himself at the center of a real-life crime far from reality TV. In February 2018, while driving through Arizona, George was stopped by officers on Interstate 40 near milepost 19. What seemed like a routine traffic stop turned into a high-profile drug arrest when police discovered nearly 293 pounds of marijuana hidden inside his vehicle. Authorities charged him with possession of marijuana for sale, transportation of marijuana for sale, and possession of drug paraphernalia. This wasn't his first time with the law. During his time on 90 Day Fiancé, George revealed that he had a previous drug trafficking conviction in California, which made it difficult for him and his then-fiancée, Anfisa Arkhipchenko, to find housing or jobs. His criminal history weighed heavily against him when prosecutors in Arizona pursued the new case. Facing potential decades in prison under Arizona's strict drug trafficking laws, he ultimately accepted a plea deal in September 2018. The agreement reduced his charge to attempted transportation of marijuana for sale, classified as a Class 4 felony. A Mojave County judge sentenced him to 2.5 years in state prison. He served his time at the Arizona Department of Corrections, where he underwent a dramatic transformation, losing over 120 pounds and reflecting publicly on how incarceration had changed his outlook. He was released in May 2020 after serving roughly 27 months, transitioning to community supervision. In interviews after his release, Jorge Nava described the arrest moment in vivid detail, saying that the traffic stop escalated quickly once officers smelled marijuana. He also hinted that despite his conviction, he was considering returning to the legal cannabis business, acknowledging that it was an industry he understood, though now one complicated by his felony record. Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart's fall from grace began in December 2001, when she sold nearly $230,000 worth of shares in the biotech company ImClone Systems, just 1 day before the company's stock price plunged. Federal investigators later discovered that Stewart's broker, Peter Bokonovic, had tipped her off that ImClone's founder, Samuel Waxel, was trying to sell his own shares after learning that the FDA was about to reject the company's cancer drug application. In June 2003, a federal grand jury in New York indicted Martha Stewart and Bokonovic on 9 counts, including securities fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and making false statements to federal investigators. Prosecutors accused Stewart of lying to investigators about the true reason she sold her shares and fabricating evidence to make it appear that she had a pre-existing agreement to sell the stock once it fell below $60 per share. During her 2004 trial, the government's case centered on deception rather than insider trading. Prosecutors argued that Stewart's lies and efforts to mislead investigators damaged the integrity of the justice system. The court later dismissed the securities fraud count due to insufficient evidence, but the jury convicted Stewart on 4 other charges: conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and 2 counts of making false statements. On July 16, 2004, U.S. District Judge Miriam Goldman Cedarbound sentenced Martha Stewart to 5 months in federal prison, 5 months of home confinement, 2 years of supervised release, and a $30,000 fine. She reported to the federal prison camp in Alderson, West Virginia on October 8, 2004, to begin serving her term. Stewart was released on March 4, 2005, after completing her prison sentence, then served 5 months of home confinement at her Bedford, New York estate while wearing an electronic ankle monitor. Her appeal was denied in early 2006, leaving her conviction intact. Although many assumed she had been imprisoned for insider trading, the dismissed charge proved otherwise. Her conviction stemmed from obstruction and lying to federal agents, not from profiting on insider information. Despite the damage to her reputation, Martha Stewart quickly returned to public life. Within months of her release, she re-entered the entertainment industry, launching the reality TV show The Apprentice Martha Stewart in 2005, and rebuilding her brand as one of America's most recognizable business figures. Apollo Nida. Best known for his appearance on The Real Housewives of Atlanta, he was living a double life, a reality TV fame on one side and an elaborate federal fraud conspiracy on the other. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, between August 2009 and September 2013, Apollo and his associates engaged in a complex scheme involving mail, wire, and bank fraud that caused more than $2.3 million in losses. Federal investigators revealed that he created fake debt collection companies to gain access to databases such as LexisNexis and Equifax, where he obtained personal identifying information from unsuspecting victims. Using those stolen identities, he opened bank accounts, deposited fraudulent checks, including U.S. Treasury checks and retirement account checks stolen from Delta Airlines, and laundered the money through multiple accounts under false names. Apollo Nida and his team also submitted false claims to the Internal Revenue Service, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and several state agencies to collect funds illegally. To further the scheme, he rented mailboxes at UPS stores across the country using stolen identities, where he directed checks and fraudulent documents to be mailed. He even created fake car dealership websites and forged auto loan documents to secure fraudulent loans for vehicles that did not exist. The investigation found that over 4 years, more than 50 individuals and institutions were defrauded through these tactics. The operation unraveled when the U.S. Secret Service executed a search warrant on Apollo's laptop in September 2013, uncovering digital evidence that directly tied him to the fraudulent activities. On May 6, 2014, Apollo Nida pleaded guilty in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Georgia to conspiracy to commit mail, wire, and bank fraud. 2 months later, on July 8, 2014, U.S. District Judge Charles A. Pennell, Jr. sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison. That's 96 months, followed by 5 years of supervised release. The court also ordered him to pay restitution to the victims, with a separate hearing scheduled to determine the full amount. Before this case, Apollo Nida had already served time in federal prison for racketeering and auto title fraud, a conviction that predated his television fame. After being released in 2009, he married attorney and reality star Phaedra Parks, stepping into the spotlight of The Real Housewives of Atlanta. But within the same year, according to court filings, he began orchestrating the fraudulent operations that would eventually lead to his downfall. If you enjoyed this and want to see more interesting videos, I'm going to be posting every day on this channel. I would really appreciate it if you like and subscribe. Thank you very much.